everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. Let's see here. I want to hold this the whole time. Hopefully you're here for the from bumper stickers to the largest dam removal in world history. If you're not, leave in just a couple minutes and we'll never know. But hopefully you'll stay. We are today just very excited for the chance to share more about the Klamath River dam removal, which was spearheaded in many ways by the Yurok Tribe. My tribe, we're here presenting on behalf of the Yurok Economic Development Corporation, on behalf of the Yurok Tribe. And we're going to do long-form introductions because we have a panel. But before we jump in, I just kind of want to start with a story and share how, in my world, probably for lots of Yuroks, you don't realize that salmon is a unique part of your life until you go out into the world and you realize that having family pictures with your grandpa having a salmon on each side, almost as big as him, or your mom talking about she knew the fish were running when she'd come home and the bathtub would be full of salmon, and soon the smokehouse would be full too. And in many ways, as someone who grew up off reservation, I would say that I knew I was Yurok through three things: the taste of salmon, the taste of eel, and the taste of loss. Now, it's hard to admit that these things at times go together, but I turned 35 this year, and so I was born in a world where we've always had the dams. But I also know that from my first memories, we as Yurok people have been against the dams. And we're fighting for the dam removal in a time when people said we were asking for something that would never come to pass, that it was impossible, it would never happen. And when I was pitching this, I had pictured the bumper stickers growing up. They were this kind of purpley blue, and they said something to the effect of "Save the salmon, undam the Klamath." And so today, I'm just very excited to share the story of how that came to pass, and offer up how we as Yurok have moved in that time, because as traditional stewards of the Klamath River and the Yurok ancestral territory, which has included the redwood forests of the far north, we have always been there since time immemorial, and it's been our responsibility to care for that place. And in present day, we have different ways that we can move when we're trying to make economic opportunities for our community, but at the same time, figuring out how to honor those things that have always been what we as Yuroks have honored. And I also had to take a second to brag. If you see, this is Alice Spot and Robert Spot. They are my grandma's grandma, Alice Spot, and Robert, her brother, were some of the last cultural knowledge holders that really worked to document much of our traditions and customs before a great amount of change and loss impacted our communities. And in many ways, it is actually through the obstacles of dam removal that we as Yurok people have had to overcome time and again. But we are still here, and it's actually with a lot of excitement that I get to share that for the first time in over 100 years, the Klamath is flowing freely again, and that there are salmon swimming all the way up. They're finding them further and further up the river. It didn't even take them more than a season. Woo! Yes. Now, if you don't know, Yurok country is about 6 hours north of the Bay Area, right on the coast. We are, as I said, traditionally the stewards of the redwoods. So if you haven't been there, I always tell people it's on your bucket list. You have to take a drive to the redwoods and see where my people have always been. I have traveled the whole world and never seen a place like home. I now study it, and I try to find ways to make it better, because I think that we have lessons that the rest of the world could learn from. But I also realize that coming from a place, settler called Humboldt County, it's a unique part of the world. And so it is, today, now our reservation is 44 miles along the Klamath from the mouth of the river, upriver. I'm a coastal Yurok, so for me, everything's upriver. But depending on who you ask, it's downriver too. But that is our reservation, 1 mile on each side, where we connect to the Aawok Reservation, a 12 by 12 mile square, where the Klamath and Trinity rivers meet. Now, by all accounts, that is the center of the world for my people and the people of the World Renewal spirituality, of which the Yurok, the Hoopa, the Karuk, the Wiyot, we are all part of that faith. Now, as with many, our current reservation is only a small portion of our original homelands, but Yurok are very fortunate in that we were never removed, that we today have a reservation that includes some of our most sacred places. And so that means that it is also our responsibility, as it always has, to continue to protect those places, even though there's been lots of reasons people have come. First it was gold, then it was timber, then it was green gold, or cannabis now in present day. There's always been reasons people have come to this place, and we have always been there, but it wasn't until the dams, and really you have to realize that the dams weren't the beginning of the story, that it goes back much farther than that. And so I wanted to take a second to talk about the Klamath Salmon Wars and how, I don't know, how many of you guys are from a public law 280 state? Anyone here? A couple hands. If you don't know what public law 280 is, it was actually a policy designed to terminate us. It was adopted during that era, where I always describe it as the federal government essentially absolving its responsibility of tribal nations in 5 mandatory states. Now, California was one of those states, and so that meant that even in present to today, state laws apply on tribal lands in ways that they don't in non-public law 280 states. When someone goes missing or is murdered, the jurisdictions that are responsible for it are state and local authorities, not federal, which is often the experience of many tribes in other places. And so that meant that in 1969, when 5 gill nets were taken from Aawok, Raymond, Max, it was done so by California officers, and it actually resulted in a case that went all the way up to the Supreme Court, where the Supreme Court upheld that California remained Indian country, and so the rules and the regulations had to respect the tribes that were there. Now, the salmon and the fish have always been a point of contention, even though in 1979 we were our right to the river was codified in an acknowledgement of our access to 50% of the fisheries, whether that was salmon, trout, etc. Now, I want to use some stories. We have the benefit of some great storytellers in our part of the world, and because the Klamath Salmon Wars aren't really something a lot of people know about, nor do they maybe realize that this is something that was happening in our lifetimes, or at least my mom's lifetime. So with that, I'd love to share some more.
So in the 1930s, the state of California asserted its jurisdiction on the river and closed the river for Indian gillnet fishing. That didn't prohibit my family, who believed that we have that right to fish, that inherent right to fish, and so my uncles kept fishing, but they fished at night, and they continued to fish, and eventually they did get caught, and that resulted in the Supreme Court case that reaffirmed our rights in 1976.
No. I started out when I was 12 years old, me and my brother. We was fishing and they was chasing us around every night. We'd go up river and fish and we'd come down and we just had them all confusion. But my brother said, I'm tired of this, I am too. The game wardens came up that day, picked our nets up. So we sat there and they said, well, whose nets was it? Everybody looked at us. Nobody wanted to claim it. I said, well, I ain't going to look my net, bro. I said, I claim all 5.
It was your Supreme Court case that reaffirmed our rights. The theme of the day here when I came home was can an Indian save the salmon, and that was an actual bumper sticker.
Yep.
And so there was a lot of animosity because there were a lot of fishermen that were here on the river, and so when we started to fish with nets, they were very unhappy because they had So they would stop him all the time. He had his family in this, and they came in the middle of the night and they woke him up and got them all out of bed with their guns because they wanted to find fish at his house. You know, I mean, just the things that he's had to go through in his family because he stood up for our fishing rights. It's not okay.
I didn't think something like the Salmon Wars could happen and nobody ever heard about it. It didn't seem right, it didn't seem fair. So we have 78, we have 79. Something happened every day. It was constant, whether it was upriver, whether it was downriver. We're hearing the stories. At this point, we're frightened. We're afraid to ride in our cars alone. Whenever we plan a trip to the store, more than one person has to go. We're frightened. We're just scared all of the time. There was an elderly gentleman who had a birthday, and we took some time off from protesting, and we had salmon on the sticks down there. We had a nice fire. He brought his drum. There was probably even 7 children, 7 women, 7 men kind of group that was together. And he was singing, he had a beautiful singing voice. And right in the middle of the singing, this big flash came off the top of the mountain, at the top of the hill up here. A big flash came. Because of that big flash, which was not normal, we knew something was gonna happen. It's like immediate, everyone, you know, that response of, oh my God, what's gonna happen now? And so the flash happened. As soon as that happened, the cars headed on down the road. So there was 7 cars headed on down the road. They stopped at a certain point. At the point that they stopped, little flashlights came on. There was over 200 little flashlights. So they're coming down the hill. When they hit the sandbar where we're at, they stop, and then they pull out their billy clubs, and they're just going like this. This is all they're doing and coming towards us. So you're thinking in your head, I'm gonna die. We're all gonna die. We're all gonna die right here, and nobody will ever know the truth about the story. When they stopped, their boat started up in the river that we did not know were there. So we were surrounded. The elderly gentleman started drumming, and he started singing, and we all sang. We all sang, and we didn't know the song, but we all knew it all of a sudden. The children sang, everyone sang the song. It got louder and louder, and then they said, let's get the hell out of here. There was a fear of our spirituality, so they left. But what happened when they left, people had let their pants, people had thrown up. You know, we were left, we were frightened. We were left frightened. Yes, they left us, but they took, when we walked from the beach, they took from us something that we never got back. You know, they took away something that I always say that before the Salmon Wars, the Yurok Tribe, the Yurok people used to be this community, and although we were the poorest tribe in the United States, you would have never known it because we had the salmon, we had the crab, we had the eel, we had all of the fish and the seaweed and everything, but we had each other. Someone dies, it's all taken care of. You didn't have to ask, you didn't have to call anybody like this, it was all taken care of. A young girl needed to go to the dance, there's the dress, there's the shoes, there's everything that she needs. And it was all there. After the Salmon Wars, that wasn't there anymore. They took something from me that I can never have back. As far as healing, how can you heal Indian country until you tell the truth? And maybe that's our responsibility. The story still has to be told. It didn't just happen, it's still happening. 78, 79 for us, but look at other tribes who are still struggling. Look at us struggling over our river, that's today. You know, that is not your ancestors. This is today what's going on here.
And Yurok people are always the first to come to the table and the last to leave the table because we can't afford not to be there to protect our resource because it's our responsibility that we ensure that the resources we have are better than how we receive them for tomorrow's generation.
Good timing on the clapping. Now, this, like I said, this isn't something that is actually that long ago. 1979, my mom was 10 years old. These are stories that still are important in our community because they are very much a marker of a before and after. But it's important to acknowledge that this was actually over 10 years after the construction of the dams that we pioneered the removal of. Now, this was, this is not just a story unique to Yurok by any means. I'm gonna move back down this way, but the graph you see here is from Salmon and Acorn Feed Our Peoples. It's a book describing what was the impact of the dams on our health and well-being. And you can see here that, you know, diabetes in particular, there's almost an exact, you can see when the dams went in, that's when diabetes became a chronic condition in our community. And in large part it was because we no longer had access to salmon and to acorns. Salmon, you know, it's the top of every health food list. It's highly sought after the world round. And it is, at the same time, it's core to our well-being and any other salmon eater along the western coast. And in those same communities, when the dams went in, when fish were no longer available, you see not only diabetes going up, but incarceration rates. I actually work on prisoner reentry for my tribe, and based on my calculations, the Yurok Tribe, I don't even want to say it, it's hard to say. We potentially have an incarceration rate in our local jails 25 times that of the national average. And you know, that's a reflection of how California deals with certain things. It's a lot harder to get to prison than it once was, but that doesn't mean you don't still see that impact on our families of the chronic churn in and out of contact with the criminal justice system. Nearly half of those incarcerated Yuroks are women, which means that criminal justice involvement is one of the main pipelines and risk factors for missing and murdered. And this is all at the same time that we have multiple substance use epidemics happening simultaneously, whether it's alcohol, meth, heroin, pills. All of these things were making our people sick, and it is not lost on us that you can almost see the switch of the flip, or the flip of the switch, when the dams go in, whatever health and well-being we as Yurok people still had, despite the invasion, it was dammed up, just like our river. Now, let's see, one of the things that I think stands out in a lot of our memories as Yurok people is the 2002 salmon fish kill. I was 12 years old, this was before the internet, and I still remember in my mind the pictures seared of bodies in the river floating. These were our family, these were our relatives, and they were dying, and none of us could do anything about it. And I wish I could say this was the only time this has happened. It happened just a handful of years ago. We saw one of the worst salmon fry, just babies, never got a chance to even get out of the river. And that has implications for generations, because these salmon did not get to spawn. That means that when their babies would have come home, they never got to go. And in many ways, I would say this, I think, is what caught the public consciousness, even though Yurok had been fighting for decades at this point. But it is always an important acknowledgement that we are the largest tribe in California, but we're also the poorest tribe in California. But despite those odds, we went to great lengths to make sure that the people who could take down those dams would listen to us. And I want to take a second now to share some words from Aawok Troy Fletcher, who was one of the men who spearheaded this from the first days. He was our first fisheries manager after we as a tribe were recognized in 1994. He was our longtime executive director, and unfortunately he did not get to see the dams come down because we lost him tragically in 2015. But in 2010, actually 15 years ago today, he spoke at this event where they talked about sending our people as far away as Scotland so that the people who could take down the dams would listen. So without further ado, let me toss it over.
Or isn't all that bad either? The Yurok Tribe, along with other Klamath Basin tribes, we actually went to Scotland. The previous owner of Pacific Core, Scottish Power, and we showed up at the shareholders meeting in Scotland. And at the time, when we showed up, everybody told us, you have got to be dreaming if you think you're going to remove 4 dams in the Klamath. You got to be dreaming. So we went back to Scotland the next year, and we got the company president, and well, actually, I don't think it was the president. I think it was the parent company to say, well, we'll talk to you about removing dams. And then, of course, we had options where Toby and I have spent many times arguing over, well, maybe 2 dams could come out. No, it's not good enough for us. And then finally, we were able to work out an arrangement, a pathway to dam removal in a reasonable time period. I think the company heard us when we said we need these dams removed. I think we heard the company too when they said, hey, we've got to worry about our ratepayers. We've got interests that we've got to cover here. And so we had to reach a solution. And a lot of people will say, well, 2020, that's when the dams are scheduled to come out. Well, that's too long. And we think the dams should come out tomorrow. Let's get that straight. But if you look at what it's going to take to do environmental reviews, to come up with engineering and other plans on dam removal, if you go through permit processes, if you look at litigation, there are people that do not agree with dam removal who will sue. If you look at potential litigation, 2020 doesn't look that far away if you look at the reality of what we've got to go through. And so I think we struck a good deal. We've outlined a way to restore fisheries, to advance fish restoration in the basin. And we've also outlined a way to achieve community stability. And so, yes, we still have deep feelings about what happened in 2002, and just listening to the tape brings up deep feelings. I'm sure Steve has them too. But it's important that we don't forget them, but it's important that we don't forget them for the right reasons. Not so we can replay the script, but so we can not get to that point again. And so we have people talking with each other and people understanding each other. That's how we started, and that's how I'll finish right now. Thank you.
Now, it was in 2010 that we have these remarks shared, and I remember being a bright-eyed, bushy-tailed college student telling my professor that my tribe had spearheaded the largest dam removal in world history. And I swear, I could see his eyes. He's like, oh yeah, all the students, all their tribes, they do something important. I know. He didn't really take much stock in it. And he said a week later, he was at a conference much like this, and he was learning about it on the big stage because of how monumental he was. And he realized that yes, indeed, this was something that was going on, but it would be a long time before we saw the dams come down. Now, I have just one more slide before we kick it to our panel, but to put some numbers or dates on the board, it was February 2010 that the dam removal agreement was reached, but it would be 12 years in appeals before it was actually a matter of moving forward. On November 17th, 2022, FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, approved the hydropower license surrender to remove these 4 dams. And after 2 years of restoration efforts led by Yurok crews, on August 24th, the Klamath was running free once again. As I started with, I shared that 112 years later, there were salmon swimming in Oregon on the Upper Klamath once again. This is actually a picture of one of those salmon taken by our fisheries department. I want to save time for my colleagues here, but I will just say that I know for me, I just had this question of how will the salmon, I know they'll know, but how will they know? We will probably be wondering and answering that question for years to come, but I'm happy to say that it took less than a season. If you look at the fossil record, salmon, lamprey, salmon are, they get all the fanfare, but they are really an indication of the health of the entire ecosystem. When they thrive, it means that everyone is thriving. And they are also in the fossil record 400 million years back, almost 500 million years. And in my part of the world, we've always said that this is where we've always been. The salmon were there before us. And while it was a long time for us in human time, 100 years is a blip on the fossil record. And so it wasn't very long until they found their way to the same creeks that their ancestors had swam from. And so I take solace in that as I think of what Yurok turns its head to next and the fights that we still have yet to fight. I'm going to save a couple minutes for that at our conclusion, but with that, I'd love to toss it to my co-panelists here. There we go.
All right. Thanks, Doctor. My name is Raymond Bacon. I'm the Executive Director of Economic Development for the Yurok Tribe, so I oversee all the economic endeavors. We're a really diversified tribe. We're not gaming focused. We're more focused on ecotourism and the restoration of the river and sharing that. Part of my career, I've been 26 years in the gaming business, and then I got called home to come back. And so I worked for Harris Corporation and went all over everywhere and did mergers and opened Rincon properties. But home was always there, and home was always the Klamath River, and home was always Grandma's house. And Doctor kind of just talking about those things and recognizing as being Yurok. Well, I was the kid that smelled like smoke in the morning because I had to put build the fire for the smokehouse, and then then later the fire department goes by and the smokehouse is burning because the eels are so greasy that it caught on fire. So there's a lot of experiences in being Yurok, but we were always told we were Yurok from the beginning, and we always fished. In my 48 years, my first experiences in fishing with my father, we were always on the banks of the river as an infant, but fishing was the part. We were in the boat, we were hugging the fish, we were taking care of the fish. The memories that I have in the effects of the decline in fish due to the dams were, in my younger years, there was always plenty of fish. And then it just declined over the years. And so we would catch 100, and then it declined, 5 years, we'd be able to catch 50. And then today, I'm happy to get 5 salmon. And so I'm grateful for that. And that feeds my family, and it's plenty for my immediate family. But we were able in the past to catch enough at one go to provide for the whole family, and that would be 30, 40 people within our family. So those memories have always stuck with me, being Yurok. And so coming home, this is a big change in recognizing the grassroots efforts of some individuals that never got to see the dams removed, like Aawok Troy Fletcher. Troy's motto was to always he was sending our children to Scotland, and he made sure that those were children because the dam removal was not going to end. And he was unfortunate enough to not see the dams removed. He was a very dynamic person. So he had to instill in our children that, this fight will continue on, and that we had to shift gears. And so a big thing with Troy was, understanding and talking to each other and making sure you were both on the same page, but making sure that you can still be on the same page, but the dams are coming out. And he was such a unique individual to fill that gap in between the two. And some of those talks, you may have to take a different perspective. It's not all attorneys. It's getting in the same room with them. It's smoking a cigarette. It's having a drink. It's playing some golf. And then it's inviting them to your home. The biggest part of that is my village. My great-grandmother was born in Blue Creek. It is the most pristine creek on the reservation. My home village currently is Notchko, but we invited them home, and we showed them our home, and we gave them a piece of our home to take with them as they left, because we wanted them to know that those dams were coming down, and we're going to restore the river. Currently, we're in the biggest ecosystem restoration that's taken place. The Yurok Tribe is heading up the planting and the replanting and the revegetation of all native seeds in the area. We received roughly over $90 million for restoration of the Upper Klamath, and it's just starting. We're planting oak trees. We're the native shrubbery that holds the banks in place. But one of the biggest things that's taken place is the river's flushing itself out, and it is naturally restoring, and it's falling back into its natural path. So those are just a few things that I'm proud of, and in Yurok, we want to make sure that those individuals are never forgotten, like Aawok Troy Fletcher, who led those grassroots, not just the attorneys. I'll pass it back over to you, Dr.
Oh, thank you. I agree. Now, Wes, so Blythe is 35, you're 48. I didn't know I was the youngest guy up there. I'm surprised. So I was born in Hoopa Valley, raised on Hoopa Valley Indian Reservation, but at that time, it was the Hoopa/Yurok Indian Reservation, and we shared resources. So I learned to fish one awesome summer night on Camel Creek. I had an uncle who I just loved. Took me fishing, and so fish, salmon. It means so much more than just going and buying a fillet off the Safeway frozen food section. But he took me fishing, and it's funny, probably true on all reservations, I don't know, but everyone has a nickname. So I went fishing, my uncle was named Babe, his buddy was named Hot Rod. There was Chuckles, Hunchy, a couple others, but I can't remember right now, but there's,
Chet.
Chet, maybe. But as a young boy, 8 years old, probably 1979, being with the men and setting the net and hearing that first fish splash in the net, and the excitement, it was dark. He took this little dim flashlight out into the waters of this little rinky-dinky rowboat that leaked. You got a can there, man, you're throwing water out after a little while, but pulling that first fish. And that went on through the night in a fire. And of course, the men, they were sipping brews and having a good time, telling stories. And it's a magical time. So the next morning, Uncle woke me up and he said, "Come on, we're gonna go." And he had his little Datsun truck full of salmon. There's been 20 salmon in the back. And he just threw it on the tarp. We have ice test, threw it on the tarp. They're all clean and gut, learned how to clean and gut that night. It's going to take you home. So it was early in the morning, it was like 7. And I went to my mom's and he said, go tell her. He said, "Oh man, go tell your mom you want to go with me. I gotta go pick up Smiles." Smiles. All right. So Mom, we caught a bunch of fish. I got the boy, I'm so excited. Uncle wants to know if I can go pick up Smiles with him. Go ahead, she said. And Uncle had been kind of sipping all night, and he was still sipping in the morning, to tell the truth. And driving down the road, went to my grandma's, grabbed a couple of those fish. Grandma come out, oh, and the look in her eye, and she was so proud. She had another fisherman in the family now. And tell her what we did. So I told her about what we did. Okay, we're gonna head out down the road, went to Auntie's, Green Auntie's, Auntie 2. Have a couple of fish, same thing. I met a lady named Louisa Jackson. There's a gym back home named after her, special woman, Hoopa Tribe elder. Same thing, tell her what you did. Pat me on the back, good job. We went around giving fish to people, elders, and finally asked one, "What about Smiles? What about your buddy? You gonna pick him up?" "Oh, hell with him," he said. All right, so we went home and we grabbed a couple of fish for your mom, so I did. And I said, "Uncle, what about Smiles?" "Ah, heck with him. I'm out of here." Headed down the road. went inside, told Mom, man, I think Uncle's drunk. Why? I said, we never could go get smiles. I said, well, what'd you do? So I told her, each house. And she said, Wesley, were they happy to get them? Yeah, they were happy to get those fish. She goes, were they smiling? I go, well, yeah, they were happy. It's Mr. Slow Learner right here. Wesley, that's what you did. You went and got smiles. You picked up smiles. And that story connected to salmon that's who I am. My good old friend from college, Chad, you haven't seen him for a while, but he knows I'm always laughing. I'm always trying to pick up a laugh, make someone smile. And so salmon is so much more than just a fish to us. And I'll share, in 1992, I had the honor to give Aawok Howard Ames, revered, respected elder in our community, a ride down for 10 days to I didn't know at the time, but it was his last ceremonial dance. And Howard was funny because if you went over 25, you'd hang on to the dad like you were speeding, you know. So it's a good hour and a half drive. Well, it was about 2.5 hours driving that 20 down the road, but it was great because I had the opportunity to ask him questions, man. Growing up in Yurok, and he grew up when there was a trail, there wasn't even a road, and his first language was Yurok. It was an awesome time. And one day we were coming back from the dance, and he was looking at me, he said, pull over. So I pulled over, and he was just looking at the river for a long time, and he said, you know, old folks used to tell me when I was young, they said, I guess you call it prophecy. Yeah? Prediction? Or yeah. They said, when the last salmon is in the Klamath, when the last salmon, he said, that's the end of the Yurok. That's the end of the Yurok. And he was sad when he said it, because he knew that the numbers were going down, you know, because of that dam and whatnot. And I became a teacher, a school teacher. I taught history and social science and PE. So I'm in such great shape now. Hate to brag. No. But at cultural arts, I taught that for a while. It was a great time. But when that fish kill happened, and the pictures, like we said, were passed around, and we had them in our classes, and the emotion that these kids had, who had that same connection I did as 7th and 8th graders to fish, to salmon. It was very heart-touching, heartbreaking, and one individual, the Aawok, she was a fellow teacher, Yurok member, Rhonda Marshall. She said, we gotta do something, and she had like a 3rd grade class. Like a week later, they're all marching around the school with cutout salmon. And that led to the annual fish fair that Hoopa Elementary in our district. It's been going on for since then, that year, 20-some years. Poor Rhonda passed about a year later, but another teacher, Teresa Sear, and her husband Leroy from Orleans, they picked that up and carried it. So we got thousands of kids, man, educated about our fish and the why dams are bad and how to take care of the river and why it's so important. So people like Rhonda and Teresa and Aawok Howard and Aawok Troy Fletcher, they're just leaders and heroes in our community in that regard. And I always thought as an educator it's important because it's resiliency, right? It's getting knocked down, but getting back up and living for another day. Put your shoes on, get out there, and do what you can. So I think that's all I got to say. Thank you.
Now, before I close, I wanted, Raymond, would you tell us what our plans are for the turbine?
Oh, yeah. Yes. Yeah, thanks. So one of our fisheries biologists, lead biologist, Michael Belchek, had talked his way into the construction corporation, which was the removal of the dams, and he had given me a call one day and said, Raymond, do you think you could take a turbine home? I guess. I was like, okay. I got a forklift, and you kind of bring it home. He's like, all right. I said, all right, I'll arrange pick up and everything. And so he called me again, and he was like, Raymond, it's like 50,000 pounds. What are you gonna do? I said, well, my forklift will get it. So come to find out, my forklift did not get it. We were able to secure one of the dams, or one of the turbines out of the dam, the Iron Gate Dam, which was the first dam on the Klamath River. We have a stainless steel turbine, and the intentions were to display it as a trophy, and to let generations know, the accomplishments of what's taken place from our previous ancestors, and let it be a message that, we'll never let this happen again with our river. So the restoration's there, the recognition's going to be there, and we're going to engrave each individual that took place in dam removal on the turbine, and it is massive, just so you know that. So if you ever come to Yurok Country or visit yurokcountry.com, take a look at it. We're on Instagram, and we'll be displaying that here within the next month.
Well, we are at time. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. We will kind of open it up for Q&A if you'd like to come talk to us afterwards. I did just want to end with kind of where we take things next. I know that even though the salmon have started to swim again, the river's flowing, it will be perhaps decades before we see the real fruit of the labor. And I mean, that's the nature of a lot of this work. You can't plant trees and expect to eat the fruit tomorrow. And we've all benefited from the efforts of those who came before. And now I don't think it's a stretch to say we turn our attention as Yurok people to another fight that some might say is equally hard to imagine, a day where someday we won't be targeted for our very lifehood. But as missing and murdered Indigenous peoples is a condition, a problem that we know impacts every community in our country, arguably every Indigenous community in the globe. It is something that lives on our reservation, and it is arguably both cause and consequence of some of the conditions that came from our livelihood being kept from us. And if we want to tend to our forests and to our river, we have to be in a good way. And part of being in a good way is keeping our family and our relatives safe. And so that's where we as a Yurok people have really turned our attention. And it gives me a lot of hope to think that, 100 years ago seems like a long time to me, but it really isn't that long. And so maybe if I think of the solutions, I'm fortunate to know that Yurok has done the impossible before, and I am eager to help us work towards doing so again. Thank you guys so much for listening. Yeah, we're going to open it up for questions. Please, go ahead.
Check. Marvin Pinicus, Vice Chairman, Southern Yurok Tribe. Raymond, I know I've connected with you before. I want to say that for today's session, and probably yesterday's too, a lot of us come here to kind of figure out ways to connect with people, to network. And a lot of times, I think because of the agenda can be kind of written from a sponsor's perspective, the idea is sometimes you don't really get that networking. I want to say though, this session has probably been the best one I've been in so far, because we're just talking storytelling. How do we connect to your stories? How does it inspire us to do better? So I want to say just that grassroots level, tribal member to tribal member is an important part, because I don't want the capital lending and financial institutions of what Res is kind of turned into to dominate what we're talking about. I think the idea of people getting on planes or in their car to come get together, meet over here, and to hear these stories and wonderful things. Thank you for what you provided to us. Thank you for allowing us to be a part of that. Go ahead.
That's it. Aawok authentic Noreen Middlejob from Alberta. I am a water and wastewater manager, and I came to Res to meet people who worked with water, and saved lives. Back home, we're one of the first ones to do the private septic. We live in shootouts in many of our houses, and I'm really proud of how you tell your story. because it started with validation. You collected a whole bunch of data and held the government accountable. That was our biggest challenge, and that's what we do. We hold them accountable because of the exceedances we are finding in the water, from arsenic to manganese to fluoride. We don't have a traditional diet. Our satellite reserve is the Pigeon Lake Reserve that supplied our people with the fish. In my family, the Saddleback family, we lost our last fisherman. He died at 82 years old, 2 years ago now, and he was my uncle. And so as a waterkeeper, I think it's really important as well to educate the children on that water. I brought you some stickers, and I worked with our youth. This is their logo, and it says Nipi. And in our language, in Cree, it's two words that are descriptive of Nia, me, Nia, I, Bimatisowin, Nipi. So water is life. And I just wanted to thank you for sharing your story, because if we don't tell this story, the children will continue to suffer. As a master's degree holder, I'm a bulldog from Gonzaga, and I got my first undergrad in history and education. And your story needs to be shared more and more. So when I go home, I'm going to ask to use you as an example for my team, because my team starts at 18. I recruited them. I have 12 staff today. I started with just me and the coordinator. And today we have 12 staff that are between 18 and 35 years old. And I'm going to mold them to protect the same way you do. And one day I hope we bring the fish back. So now, from the Cree out in Alberta, Treaty 6 territory, hi.
I wanted to respond to the last 2 points. Please come up, please ask a question. I wanted to say, I thought it was very important for us to share this story, because when I've been in rooms with lots of natives from Indian country, Yurok is often just, if there's another one in the room, I'm excited. Often that's not the case. But we've had to make choices across time that have resulted in maybe us not having the biggest amount left in the bank, or maybe we don't have these other metrics of wealth accumulation that the outside would see as metrics of our well-being. But I know that we have never given up the things that made us who we are, even when we were faced with violence, and especially then. And it's just something that fills me with a lot of pride to be able to say that these are my people and this is what we fight for. And it's not just us, but we are fortunate that we still have such a tie to these stories and these teachings, that if we can offer them to the rest of Indian country, I think it's because that is in some ways where our tenacity has helped us, that we were able to hold on long enough so that someday these teachings can reach more and better, and the world will benefit accordingly. Please, I saw someone coming.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Your story is great. Spent some time down in the valley in Hoopa. Well, Jones for 3. That's what I remember growing up. And so we played basketball with that way at Troy, and it's really great to see, his sustainability, his fight. Even though I couldn't be here to see it, to stand up for our salmon. We're salmon people too as well, and some of the fishing wars that your people went through, we went through too as well. And we're talking about the main lower Snake River dam removals, and how when the salmon gave up their life for us, that made us be the stewards of the land, the water, where they return to. And I think these folks are right that your story is well told. We had a next season, they're already there and returning. So I'm really just glad to be a part of in your community. Previously, I remember when those fish died on the river, you know, in 2002, and elders that aren't here now. I remember hearing stories from them down there. You know, Don Moore used to come hunt with us many years ago and up in Eastern Oregon, and his family and stuff like that. So I just think that, you know, I really appreciate the story. It is a story that is a success, but how you've sustained through generations having to go clear across the ocean for people to hear you. And I think that, you know, salmon ain't made to be, you know, in a pool like they are along the Columbia River and things like that. You know, they're made for that environment. And some of the same things that you said or whatever, that your people said, if the salmon don't return, we're not going to be here as people either. And so I'm really glad I got to see this presentation. Good to see you. You too, Buck. Buck used to come to Hoop on, pick up us little guys and score about 40 a game. Good
afternoon. I have a question, and it's, I would say, like, not a good question, but it's a question that I want to ask. And I'm not from the coast, but I really respect, you know, the story, and it fills me with a lot of hope to see what the power and possibility of what humans can do to help our relatives. But I was wondering if the putting people over fish legislation that the new Trump administration is trying to implement, if that's going to impact this project or your resources. And I was just curious, one, is it going to impact you, and then two, like, how are you going to address it, or what are the plans, or just anything towards that end? Because as soon as I heard about it, my heart immediately was like, no, they've done all this work, so.
Yeah, I'd just like to say, like, definitely it is. It's, he's got control of the media and the narrative, right? And so he's going to, and then this is historical from day one, right? Colonization, they've had the script, their narratives, but we're resilient and we keep on being true to who we are every day. Like I said, every day, go out, be who you are, tell your story, be resilient, and this government's going to come and go, right? It's going to come and go. There'll be a new person in charge, not soon enough, but soon, in the scope of the million-year life cycle of a fish. It's going to get better. We're just going to stay true to who we are. And that's where I'm just on council for about 2 years now, third year. Vote in October at the Yurok Summit. But don't tell, really. It's going to change. I mean, one thing that I'm seeing being on council with the Yurok Tribe government, one thing we do, I really, really admire their approach to whatever government entity, agency in the land is, even tribe to tribe. It's always respectful with almost a soft voice, but a consistent voice. You know, it's like water, right? Drip, drip, drip. It's just a drip, but we're not going to stop. It's going to evoke change one day in a good way, and in the direction we as Indian people know it has to go, and we know Creator's on our side, and I think we're just going to keep believing that. I don't know if that answers your question, but
I think I could maybe address that on a fiscal aspect. I think that might be a little more of it. It's called drawdown. In any of the grants that are coming, you know, our fiscal department is on top of drawdown. When we're hitting, we're right there, and tomorrow morning we can take a drawdown. We're going to take a drawdown. The effects are coming. I recognize that overall, and so we just need to be prepared, and we'll try to make the program last as much as possible, as long as possible. So it's having a strong fiscal department and managing that money and making sure that that money is transferred into the bank to continue the program for restoration. And just kind of a quick announcement real fast too, is 6,000 salmon made it past Iron Gate Dam. And then we had a restoration of 8 condors are in the air over Yurok country. And it's been hundreds of years for a condor.
I'm gonna let the cat out of the bag. Pterodactyls. We'll bring it down.
I was like, well, we've hit all the bases. We've ended on a good note. I'd love to just close with a prayer. I think I'm feeling that. So I don't know which way Mount Shasta is, but that's traditionally which way I would try and point. Creator, thank you for bringing us here today. I recognize that most of us are from places very different than the one we find ourselves in Las Vegas, an artificial place in the middle of the desert. But every year we get to come together, we get to make new friends, and we make new connections. And I think that we need to remember that before the invader was here, we all knew each other. We were all relatives, just like we remembered in the general session. And I hope that we all take that spirit from this presentation and from that call to remember our relatives on each side of us. I pray for the river and for the salmon, for the steelhead, for the eels, for everyone who draws sustenance, both physical and spiritual, from our river and from our home, and for all rivers and homes that we come back and we'll go home to when we leave this place. Please keep everyone safe, coming and going from Res 2025, and prayers up for letting us come together in this way. Waka, waka, waka.
Thank you.
I was like, I'm turning the recorder off right now, and I'm gonna type it all up. Yes.